For coming tonight. We got a very special VR panel. Big thanks to Ravi for putting this together. I'll let you introduce the panelists, but yeah. So a couple of super quick things because we have an extra long session for you tonight. Industry news. So Montreal International Game Summit recently happened and it was a big success. I wanted to do a shout out to Snowden Studios, who has been in the news everywhere, has been doing really well. They were at MIGS, they spoke, they mentored at the IGDA Mentor Cafe. They worked on a game, Dead by Day, that was nominated for an award, 2 awards actually. So congratulations to JS and the Snowden team. So very quickly, so tomorrow night is the video game concept art night. So we're bringing developers, artists together. We're having a very swanky video game art night tomorrow at McMillan in the market. There are less than 10 tickets left, and the tickets are $10. There's going to be drinks, there's going to be food, fully catered, there's going to be artwork from local artists, and a lot of the video game industry is going to be there. So grab your tickets. You can get them on Pens and Pixels or Julia Mood and Partners website. So get those and hopefully see you tomorrow night. And then the last thing I wanted to mention was Ottawa Unity User Group. Actually kicked off a session last week that was awesome. They're going to be picking back up and doing events regularly. In January is the next event, and they're going to be looking for speakers on Unity. So if you're interested, check out Ottawa Unity User Group and message the organizers if you want to speak. And actually, I lied. One last quick thing. Google is actually interested in Ottawa. And so they've reached out, and there's a group of us that are starting a Google Developer Group meetup. We're going to be meeting every 2 months, and it's going to be a very innovative, hands-on type event. If you're actually interested in more details, ask myself or Chris here, and we'd love to share and bring some more people into that. So that's it for me. I'll let you take it away, Ravi. Thank you.
Hi everybody, thanks for coming. We're here to talk about virtual reality. The first large mass market headsets came out earlier this year, and one will be coming out early next year as well. And we have 6+ years of combined development experience on stage for you today. We have Justin Wilkinson, project manager at SimWave. We have John Gagne, CEO and CTO of Brinx Software. Alan Pestaluky, co-founder of Keep Talking, Nobody Explodes. And Daniel Beauchamp from Shopify. Each of these men are very knowledgeable in their fields and will be leaning the years of their combined experience for meaning, insight, and anything we can use to help the community grow and foster development. So give them a hand. So gentlemen, if you would like to just start off and tell everybody a little bit about what you're doing and the projects you're working on right now.
So hi everyone, I'm Justin Wilkinson. I work over at SimWave Consulting over in Canada. We're doing virtual reality museum exhibits to begin with, just because there's a lot of room for education and for teaching the next generation of children new information about not only about history, or I guess information about history, but also on top of that, just things that they can, things that they would have never been able to do otherwise. So. For us, we've got 2 vignettes that we're working on for next year. One of them is the Battle of New Ridge, so to commemorate Canada's contribution to the battle during World War I, as well as another endeavor with the Canadian Science Tech Museum for their CN6400C locomotive. So,
thank you, Justin. You're done.
My name is Jonathan Gagne, CEO of Brinx Software. At Brinx, we do a few things, but one of the most innovative things that we're working on is a 3D modeling content creation platform in virtual reality. that lets anyone easily create with their hands, sculpt, paint, and more importantly, to do that socially with anyone in the world in real time.
So I'm Alan Pestaluky. I'm one of the developers of the game Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes. It was designed initially as a virtual reality game, as a social virtual reality game specifically. It's now available on, I think, 4 or 5 virtual reality headsets, as well as PC. You can play it without a virtual reality headset.
Cool. Hey, I'm Daniel from Shopify. So I work on a VR team over there where we try to figure out how commerce and VR kind of go together. Now, a lot of you are probably thinking, oh, it's going to be a virtual shopping mall, and stop right there. Because in VR, you have superpowers, right? You can be anywhere you want, be anything you want, do anything you want. And with those powers, will you really go to the Rito Center as your first experience? Probably not, right? So we're trying to figure out, given this new medium, what are the unique features of it that will draw people towards it to do shopping experiences? What will that shopping experience look like? Then we also look at it from our merchants' perspective. Our customers who design and create amazing products, how can VR help those merchants out? So recently we just launched a tool called Thread Studio, where people can design shirts in virtual reality and then sell them in real life, which is actually one of the first tools out there where you can actually export something from VR into real life and sell it.
Thank you. For the panel, what limitations exist with current VR technology and how are they being addressed?
Right now, so at least for us, one of the problems we're trying to work with is trying to give people a chance to interact with the world. So you have things like people working on solutions for locomotion, people working on solutions for haptics and things like that. Just allow people to get in there and play around with things. But yeah, the one thing that we're all trying to tackle right now is things like motion sickness, and just trying to make it easier for people to get in, experience things, and leave with a really nice feeling afterwards.
I'd have to agree, motion sickness is a huge issue that the top headsets have come a long way on working on, especially when you have tracking all within that space. It allows you to line up your actual movements with what your inner ear is detecting. So your brain says, okay, everything's fine, and it doesn't make you ill. So one of the limitations too, even in the highest one, like Vive, is that you have a room. But that's still limiting, so you have to teleport around, which is not too bad, but we need to find other ways. But I think that the even bigger challenge is that the majority of users after this first wave are going to be cell phone users of basically virtual reality, cell phones. And right now we have Samsung VR as well as Daydream that's coming out. Now, I can't say if this is going to happen, but they're saying there's going to be 200 million of these Google seeing this within the next 2 years. Now, the problem with that is that when you're stuck in one spot, it doesn't have the position tracking, so you have to stay here. And that doesn't align with your inner ear to cause the problem you're talking about. So, if they can solve, they're working on solving this problem with inside-out tracking, so that they can sense the environment and then move around accordingly. As well as when you have the touch controllers, that's going to make a huge improvement.
Alan, I see you have a David.
Yeah, I mean, we were talking about David. Bring one along. Stick your phone inside there, slap that on your face. It comes with basically a Wiimote. And this actually, talking about limitations in VR, this is more like a Wiimote than pretty much any other thing that you're probably familiar with. It does not have full 6 degrees of freedom. You can't move it around and have it tracked perfectly. It has basic motion sensing that can tell kind of your orientation. And then it does a little bit of guesswork to figure out, oh, if you've turned it like that, you probably moved your arm like that, so we're going to position it there in the world. But it's not 100% matching up. So there's limitations that exist with this kind of an input method. And this is what you get with the Google Daydream, for example. But then something like the PC platforms like HTC Vive and Steam VR, you have motion controllers that are tracked in the physical space. And at that point you get something that's a lot closer to what people are expecting. In terms of other limitations though, would you like to jump on some more stuff? Go for it. Okay, so one of the things that I experience with VR is actually just eye strain and fatigue from being in VR, and these are caused by some problems that are solvable and some problems that we're working towards but don't have the solutions for yet. Things like the fact that in the real world your eye is used to focusing on different focal lengths, distances, and so in VR, with the current VR headsets, you're actually focused at one distance all the time. Even when stereo separation tells you that an object is closer to you, your eye actually doesn't need to refocus. So your eye expects to refocus, but it doesn't refocus, and that can cause some fatigue and eye strain. Things like just even the pixel density, the number of individual dots of color that you have within a degree is much less in virtual reality than it is in the real world, and that can cause fatigue. So the idea of like any person being able to just spend 4, 5, 6 hours in VR and have them be just as comfortable as they would be in the real world, that's unrealistic right now, and that's because of some technical limitations that are being worked on and are being improved. So those are some of the limitations. Some of the other types of limitations. Another one is the haptic feedback and being able to feel virtual objects. Right now there's no mass commercial solution for that. Right now we have a lot of the motion controllers that you interact with. You effectively are like a ghost, or you pass through things in the virtual world. And another limitation of current technology, but we're getting there.
I would say one limitation from like a developer point of view is, let's say you're working with the Vive. So the Vive does its tracking. It has 2 base stations on opposing corners of the room. It sweeps out these lasers a bunch of times a second, and then the headsets essentially can infer their positions based on how those lasers, like the timing of the lasers sweeping over the headset. Now, on our team we have 6 people, and we're in a moderately sized room. But we all have Vive headsets and we all have PCs, and we want to be able to test stuff out. But positioning those lighthouses are actually, it can be actually pretty tricky, because if you put them too far, the accuracy actually dips down quite a bit and you get a bit of shakiness. If you put them too close, there's actually people in the room who then the lasers won't hit them. So right now you can't actually put more than 2 lighthouses, because then it'll get all confused. And so it just gets a bit tricky as we're trying to have 6 people all developing on it. And it gets really tricky when you go to demo your stuff at, let's say, a conference, and you bring your Vive, and you're like, I'm going to set up my little booth here, and someone has lighthouses in the booth adjacent to you, and those lasers are coming into your thing, like, game over. Like, your tracking's just not working. So Steam is working really hard, or Valve rather is working really hard on making it so you can have multiple lighthouses in the same area seeing each other, but that's the current limitation.
What's it like to actually use virtual reality compared to the expectations people have of using virtual reality? And what do you do to either play into these expectations or to break them?
I don't know if we can actually answer that.
I know people like to do when they put on a headset. The first thing you do is they put it on and they're like, oh cool, it's a virtual world. And they just stand there and stare. They don't move their head. They just stand there and just is the virtual world going to happen to me? I mean, we go to demo, and we literally, we have interactive credits. And the words are coming down. We've got leap motion on the front so you can do hand tracking and stuff like that. And we have the words come down and says, reach out and touch the words. And we're like, okay. What did that just say? Oh, it said to reach out and touch the words. And they just keep staring and you should reach out and touch the words. Like, oh, okay. And then it's getting over that initial hurdle. But a lot of people expect Minority Report and things like that for those really crazy. Oh, I should be able to reach out and touch and feel and all this other stuff. And we're still getting there. But the one thing that I always love is just you put the person like someone who's never tried virtual reality before. They put on a headset for the first time and it's just oh wow. And there's that tiny little smile they get, experiencing something new, and that is it's kind of magical in a way. But yeah.
I mean, I think these are all generalizations, and I think you captured it pretty good.
Yeah.
The broad strokes of the generalizations. But to further iterate on the last point you're saying, it really is interesting to see people try it on for the first time, especially people outside of just the average person in society, so someone really young or a lot older. So for example, I've seen my grandmother, she's 90 years old, and she's in this virtual world, and she can't travel a whole lot anymore, and to see her look around and be able to see all this virtual reality video, she's just in awe. This is incredible. And then on the opposite side, I have my little nieces and nephews, and they're trying it, and they just like can't get enough of it. This is just like a whole new world. They gotta actually live out their dreams.
So I actually, in terms of people's expectations going into VR, I feel that there's two different paradigms that people are conditioned and expected to feel, mostly from movies. One is the Star Trek holodeck. Two is the Matrix. Plug in, and the difference here is that in a Star Trek holodeck, you move in with your physical body, and you use your physical body to navigate a virtual world that feels just like it's the real world, versus the Matrix, where you plug in and you expect your physical body to actually just be lying in a chair, and your mind thinks you're doing things that your physical body isn't actually doing. And I think those are the kind of the two things that people dream of, and it's not really that they deeply expect that from current technology, but I think that there's little glimpses of those things that they want to see in current day technology that's not there yet. And how do you design your experiences to deal with those expectations? I think it's all around making sure, obviously, that you don't ask the player to do the things that would prompt them to, like, if you're in a situation where, I don't know, you're asking a player to do something that's going to require fine motor control, that usually is going to involve like a feeling, like a haptic scenario. So that fine motor control, you're not going to want to ask a user to do that because they're not going to have the capacity to, because they don't have that haptic feedback to be able to do that motion. So you need to make sure you design your experiences based on what the technology is capable of. And right now there's that huge novelty factor where people are so excited about this stuff that it's okay that we can't do the spectacular just yet, because what we have right now is spectacular on its own.
Yeah, I like to say, like, now's the time to jump into VR because of the quality bar is like on the floor. Right? You could give someone a cube, like a physics activate cube, and a virtual stick, and like an hour they'll be like, wee.
They won't be able to get enough.
In the same way though, when iPhone games first started coming out, like you were happy playing like stupid little things. Like now you expect to have like really engaging, like crazy experiences. So 5 years out, you won't be able to get by with like a simple little cube and stick game. Another thing though is like it's easy for us to, let's say as we're playtesting our games or designing stuff, to then expect our users to be as familiar with VR as we are. So we'll like build all this functionality, and it's not necessarily complex, but you have to remember that they're holding these controllers for the first time. It's like asking someone to use a computer when they've never seen a mouse before. So you can't just expect them to be like, oh, I'll double click this, I'll drag this, I'll do that. So you get them in there, and you're like, oh, like just reach over to that thing, and they're just like, and they don't remember what the controllers necessarily look like, and so there's just like, you need to just be very aware of your own biases when you're developing it. People won't get it, and you need to kind of be a bit hand-holdy with your experiences.
All right. So what would be the differences between VR development and traditional software development?
I'd say the first thing is just understanding spatially where everything is. Like on top of like kind of ignoring the headset for a second, but like putting things on and just making sure like, okay, this thing is in front of the player. Well, is it in front of the player here, or is it like 3 miles off in the distance? And then doing a lot of testing, that's one of the things that comes up. Like we've got loop motion, you've got to reach forward and play around with things. And it's like, when we set up the world, it's like it's actually really far away. But then just doing the testing and like putting on the headset, taking off the headset, putting on the headset, taking off the headset, like, and just constantly having to flip back and forth, like it's exhausting. And then just being aware of like technical limitations of like rendering and stuff. So
I think one of the big things, between traditional gaming, game development, and VR, is you really have to be aware of the technical limitations of the headsets, as well as what the needs of the human are. And what I mean by that is you're not just creating something where people are playing anymore. You're creating a simulation that's going to convince, if you do it well, the person that it's real. And to do that, you have to know, okay, this headset does this type of tracking, right? The human ear, picks up these kinds of things, and if they're not aligned, it's going to make them feel ill. Okay, the headsets, as you had mentioned, doesn't take care of accommodation. That's the focus of the island. So you want to keep it in within a certain amount of meters distance. A lot of your operations, you can go far, you can go close, but if you're doing too much here, then it's going to make the person feel uncomfortable. And that can go on and so on and so on and so on. But essentially, kind of the shortcut to learning all those is just really learning the best practices to VR. And then don't just try to slap it on. Go from the ground up understanding. Go from the ground up understanding that, as you mentioned before, and I think it's a really one of the best statements in general about VR is, if you make it like the real world with a touch of magic, I mean, that's about the best that we can do right now. So you should be aiming for that in your development right from the beginning and be conscious of that the entire time. And one other thing is that also to mention, to continue on what you said about realizing these people have never done it before, gamers have played games before. They know how to do it. This is a totally new experience, and you almost have to think about what you know your biases, but break down the steps that you know like a program and say, okay, I have to do these things. Okay, I have to give all kinds of little cues within the program to let the person, figure out how to solve it.
I think a lot of what I was going to say has been touched on already. On the tech side, though, there's definitely a lot you need to think about in terms of optimization, in terms of performance for VR. So when you're developing a game for other platforms, if you drop a few frames, it's a bad thing, but it also doesn't make your user sick in a typical traditional video game. When you start dropping lots of frames in virtual reality, you strongly are risking the chance of making somebody physically ill. And because of that, that kind of physical discomfort that your user might have, it's imperative that you keep frame rate. And this is not just like, oh, we need to hit 60 frames per second. A lot of these platforms, you need to hit 90 frames per second, and you need to hit 90 frames per second with 2 cameras rendering. So lots of techniques in optimization, including like double wide rendering, where you do both eyes in one pass, that kind of thing. Thankfully, Unity, the game engine Unity, for example, has done a lot of optimizations for VR rendering and optimization around that. So people are definitely working on that, and those are technical problems. They can be solved. So that's great. They can be solved, so that's nice. Yeah.
I'm glad you say that, because from a tooling perspective, both Unreal Engine and Unity are doing fantastic jobs of integrating that within the engine. So it's not like you have to download some new VR editor to do VR development. Use the tools that you know and love, and it can be as simple as just you load up this project and press play in VR, and sure, it won't be perfect, but then you can just put on your headset and oh cool, and move around, and then you can pretty easily start adding interactions in there. So it's nice to know that your usual workflows that you would do in Unity and Unreal will stay mostly the same. It just comes down to a few of those best practices too, and optimizations. Best practices, something like in a Call of Duty game, when an explosion goes off, you probably want to shake the camera to simulate oh shit's going south. But in VR, if you shook the camera, you will vomit. So then it's just well, use the same sort of workflow as you would with a traditional game, but just make sure you don't do a few things.
Yeah, when it comes down to it, just experiment. That's the biggest thing. Is there's a lot of really common techniques for doing things camera-oriented billboards. And you can't really do that because if you start turning your head, things go crazy.
Well, on that note, what kind of systems have you all implemented in your software, in your games, in your projects to enhance the feel for the user, make things easier, really draw attention to the things you want to draw attention to?
I guess for me, it's we're using Unity. Plugins are fantastic, by the way. But one of the things we're trying to play around with locomotion, so just trying things out. If the user is, if you're trying to get the user walking along a rail at a specific velocity, then you can figure out, okay, you don't want to move them when they're not looking forward, so we've been playing around with a few different solutions, like the more they look forward, the faster they go, trying to make sure the leap interactions are working well, and other than that, it's playing around with things on like a case-by-case basis, because some things might work for, I guess, the museum realm that wouldn't necessarily work for a video game. So it's mostly just playing around with things as they become problems, and just trying to find nice solutions.
I think it's really just about, you know, understanding usability, as opposed to just, you know, having some kind of plugin or something that you can put in. When you're building a VR app, I feel like it crosses a lot of boundaries. Like, I'll give an example here. If you're doing web development, you can have someone on the back end, you can have the front end, and then the designer can take care of a lot of the things with making the look and feel look good, and, you know, the usability is high and stuff. The person on the back end doesn't have to worry about that as much. When you're doing it in VR, you got to worry about these things all the way through. So the person at the very low level, even creating algorithms or whatever, needs to be conscious of these things. And the challenge is that you can't just apply the previous, you know, usability tricks. You have to understand the usability principles and think about how they can be best applied, you know, in this new space. And one in particular, and this is kind of in between this question and the last one, is really focusing on treating the user as their own agent. Okay, don't try to make them do anything. If you want them to do something, guide them in a way to get them, right? If I were to just like stand up and walk, you guys are following my eyes. I didn't have to tell you to do that. I didn't walk up and take your head and force you to do it like a video game would, right? I cued it. So cue the user and let them do it, and they'll have a better experience.
That's good. So specifically with Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes and what we did to make our game feel good, like the systems that we implemented, it's more about, for our game, what we didn't do. Again, just going on the same thing, like we are not making a traditional video game. Things that are cinematic in nature are things that we avoided in our game. Because we were designing our game for VR from the ground up, we were able to take the design approach of, oh, well, we're just not going to have movement, locomotion in our game. You're going to be sitting at a desk, then you're going to fade to black, and then now you're sitting at another desk. And like, easy, simple to implement. And this would have been probably a very difficult game to port. Maybe not very difficult game, but like, we could have easily made the decision that, oh, you're gonna get up out of your chair and walk towards the door and, you know, move out that door, and then like in the next scene you're gonna move from a door back into the chair, and like, yeah, that would have worked in a traditional video game, but it would not have worked for us. So we removed that entire feature. Now it's just a big, you know, like that. We never had it. We decided against it, and that was critical for us. So in terms of getting the game to feel, actually the point that was made earlier about mimicking the real world and making the virtual world behave like the real world, that's a fantastic way to make virtual reality games just feel great. So any systems that support that, I think, are generally a good choice.
One pitfall I see a lot is people kind of taking what worked in one medium and then just like trying to like shove it into this next one. So I see a lot of it with VR devs dealing with menus. So you have like, oh, I need to be able to have like this menu to like change some sort of options. So like, I know, put some like plane in front of you and you have this laser pointer and you like point towards your options and all that. And it works, but it's not delightful. And you see it in like Fantastic Contraption, which is this awesome VR game where you're kind of building these little like physics machines to solve puzzles. And like when you build the components up, if you want to like take some off or destroy them, there's no like trash can icon. It's like you take this little needle, go up, and you like pop the stuff. And that's like a delightful interface. And when we were developing Thread Studio, our app that lets you design shirts and then sell them in real life, we have this thing where you have this mannequin in front of you wearing a shirt, and you want to be able to change the colors on that shirt. And yeah, we could have just put like a color picker, where you just like take your Vive controller and like go through a list, and like there's a scroll bar on the side too. And it would work, but it would suck. So we experimented a ton, and what we ended up with was this kind of like swatch card or like deck of like color swatches. You can pick up and they fan out, and then you kind of like put your finger over it, and it has this nice little haptic effect as you go over each one, and you click, and then like the shirt just like takes on that new color. And it's functionally the same as that menu, but like it's just you could see the difference when we tested users with both systems. They're like, oh wow, cool, and they're doing it, really getting into it. And so those are like the little things that just like make that VR experience magical.
What would you do? What are the considerations for full body tracking as opposed to just headset and controller tracking?
Yeah, we were originally going to use the Kinect for doing some of our work, and then realized that was going down really fast. Primarily because like if you bring your hand up in front of the camera, now it can't see your face, or it can't see your upper arm, it can't figure out where your rest of your arm is, and then all of a sudden like all the information I was getting was garbage, so like the character's arm would start flapping around. It's great. But for that, like you need to make sure you got a good vantage point. You need to make sure it's far enough away. Like with the the guys were mentioning earlier with the Vive, you have the two laser base stations that are sweeping, and they're tracking with the same stuff that the headset is. So that's all fine and good. But when doing full skeletal tracking or full body tracking, you need to be aware of do I have one camera? Do I have multiple cameras? Are they set up to make sense of it? Do they have a high enough bandwidth to be able to take the images and then process them? And then you just need to make sense of it on the other side. So it's there are some significant considerations. That, and if it's infrared, you have to take into consideration like the environment. Is it not bright enough? Is it bright enough? Is it too bright? Things like that, at least from my experience.
I think it really depends on your application. And what I mean by that is, if you just want to develop and have fun, then do whatever the heck you want. Like, have fun. But if you want to make something that's going to sell, then you have to think about things that don't have to do with it being a cool interface. And you have to think about the market, right? So I'll give an example for that. I would love to use Elite Motion to use it to help our drawing application, and to use your hands. I just think that would be incredible. But you know what? There's maybe, 250,000 ballpark high-end consumer VR headsets out right now. That's already a small enough market, let alone finding the ones who happen to have, Leap Motion on as well. It cuts our market size really. If we support it as well, and that's interesting. But the point is there's a lot of business decisions to be made relating to that, and how that affects your market. So I'd like to say, in my opinion, that's one of the biggest ones.
So when you're going to the idea of the full body motion, walking around a room, I don't know, one of the things that comes to my mind is the idea that you need to seriously consider how to deal with players walking through virtual walls. When you have somebody sitting and not physically moving, you don't really need to worry. Like in our game, it's a seated VR experience, and you don't really need to worry about somebody walking through past that wall over there. Especially like our game actually doesn't really have anything hidden behind the wall, so it doesn't matter. But maybe there's gameplay where there's an actual like gate, and you need to solve a puzzle before you can go through that gate. And if the player just goes and walks through it, it's like, well, that's kind of breaks the game. So a clever implementation of how to deal with that motion in the physical world, breaking through the virtual world's bounds in the Gallery, which is one of the games that's available for Steam VR, the HTC Vive. They will actually take and blur your vision and dampen your audio, so it's almost like an underwater effect. Anytime you pass through a bound that you're not supposed to pass through. And that's actually a really clever trick to deal with the fact that people will physically move through a virtual wall. So things like that need to be thought about. That's something like as you move into the track area. You also need to make a decision on if you're going to design your experience within the room that they have available, the play area that they have available. Or if you're going to decide that, okay, well they have this play area that they can actually walk around in, but we want them to be able to explore a larger environment. How are you going to do that? So if you're going to full body tracking, maybe you're going to be considering the idea of a teleporting mechanic, where the user basically points and says, oh, I want to go over there, and then they teleport over to that location. And that actually ends up coming across as, to me, it's actually a very different experience than when I'm forced to stay in a single defined play area. And part of the reason for that is that now teleporting has become my reliable transportation method. My legs are no longer reliable because I might not be able to reach that using the physical constraints that I have. So I actually decide to teleport always. If that teleporting is available, I'm always teleporting. But if teleporting is not available and the game is, or the experience is designed for a fixed space, then I'm going to use my real legs because that's my only choice. And I actually really like that a lot more because that feels more real. The idea of actually moving myself physically through a virtual world. So those are things to consider when you go into this full body movement, things like that.
Interesting that you brought up the teleport thing, because I do it all the time too. And it's like, the thing is literally half a foot in front of me, and I'm just like, teleport, that will happen.
It's reliable, you know?
So like, but just know that if you have teleportation in your game, every user will use it in that way. In the same way, if you have anything interactive, people will throw it. Like, they will pick up something, and they'll be like, huh. It's really interesting from our perspective with commerce, because you could like lay out a really cool storefront, like looking at this thing, and they're like, ooh. And then if they don't have a way to teleport to get that back, they're just kind of like, oh, how do I get that back? And you're like, sorry, like, you screwed up. So, things you learn as you're doing user testing. But yeah, just on the topic of like the full body motion tracking stuff, I see some games try to like put in a virtual body because it's weird if you like look down and like you don't see anything. I actually find it's like more weird to see something that's not you, especially if like the legs aren't exactly where your legs are. Like it's amazing that even if you just see like floating hands, you're like, oh, that's cool. But if I put in like an inverse kinematic like body like showing the arms and like I could be holding something here, but my elbow could be here or it could be down here or anywhere. Like, but if that doesn't like match up with what like how I feel my body is in, I'll be like, something's wrong. So just something to keep in mind when you do like any sort of like IK systems with VR. It does work though in like a multiplayer setting. Like if I'm looking at Justin and IK is working, because like I don't actually know in real life how his elbow is actually oriented, but on you, the player, try to avoid that.
Good point there. Do it if you can do it perfectly, and if you can't, don't do it.
If you lean forward, then like do this. Like, is the body supposed to be here? Is it supposed to be bending forward? And then like that could throw somebody's balance off, and then they could fall over. And there's a whole bunch of like just trying to figure out how they're going to perceive that. It's a nightmare.
You could kill someone.
VR.
Alan, just can you explain what you mean by a seated experience?
Right. So when you're talking about a seated VR experience, that usually is a limitation of technology a lot of the time. With something like the mobile VR, you stick your phone into here, it actually doesn't have the ability to track your position at all. So if you're standing, you're going to be literally falling over because you can't keep your balance because your world that you're seeing isn't matching what you're actually doing in the real world and what your balance, your inner ear is telling you for balance. So all of these technological restraints, and like PlayStation VR is another example where you can do like standing VR, but generally you're expecting, you actually have a camera that's watching you, it has a limited frustum, it doesn't actually know where the floor is, so doing standing VR is really tricky. There are some ways to approximate where the floor is based on certain, like you can actually get the user to calibrate where the floor is. But all these technological restraints mean that you have kind of like your technology knows where the headset is relative to this maybe like a camera sensor or something like that, which means that you can make assumptions that, okay, well, if they were sitting, you know, they can maybe move around like this, and they can kind of turn their head like this. So a seated VR experience is just that experience designed for the limitations of technology that doesn't allow you to move around in a space. Compared to something like a room scale is the term that Steam, Valve had coined for describing the idea of calibrating. This is where the floor is, this is the play area, the space that they can move around in, and then just setting the user free inside this virtual area that they can move around in. So that's a contrast between something like a room scale and something like a seated VR experience.
And what impact do you see areas like VR arcades having on the kind of content that's produced for virtual reality?
I think that as more and more people get a chance to go out, try things, and just get to experience it, because a lot of people, even now, still don't have a chance to get out, try out one of the bigger PC headsets and things like that. So it gives people a chance to get out, try it. It potentially increases whatever market we're going to have for VR. And then on top of that, as people get to try it out, they get inspired. They get to oh, maybe I can try this thing out. Maybe if they're in the middle of playing sort of zombie game. I can't remember the one they have for the Vivens, but you got people who were just throwing things. I'm oh, okay. Well, what if I had a game where I just have a flamethrower, and then it just builds off of that. And I don't know. I think what's going to come out of that is a lot of people are going to try things out, get inspired, and who knows where that's going to go.
On that note, we just had an event at a VR arcade. John Wade here is co-organizer of Ottawa VR and myself, just about maybe 2 weeks ago or so. So we'll be doing another one. And just 58 Beach Street, there's another local company. We're always happy to support them. So, Ottawa VR is our meetup group, and feel free to come out to either a VR arcade event or another one on the topic. But I encourage everyone to check that out.
On VR arcades, put a little plug, our game is available now for VR arcades. We have a commercial license up on Steam. But in terms of the impact on what's being developed for VR, I'm really excited by the fact that a VR arcade experience, if you can design something for that, that's when you can assume a room size. And when you can assume a room size, you can make all types of fantastic design choices. You can require a user to move from this side of the room to the other side of the room to change their perspective, and by changing their visual perspective, they can maybe discover new things that they couldn't see in that virtual world, uncover puzzles and things like that. And that's something that's really hard to do with current game development in VR, because you can't assume that the user's always going to have this amount of space to work with. So VR arcades are great because you can assume that. And when you can create tailored experiences for that, I think that's going to be great. I personally see realistically that because these are such custom experiences, I'm skeptical of how much investment will go into VR arcade titles. There might be some specific high investment theme park type things. I can see those getting high investment, but AAA quality games that you'd see at multiple arcades, not just a single one. But I don't see those happening too much. Maybe I'm totally wrong, but I wouldn't expect that AAA fidelity of experience for a VR arcade that's in multiple locations. And because of that, I actually think that maybe one of the more interesting things might even be augmented reality in arcade scenarios, where you can make a custom tailored experience that augments virtual elements and real world elements. And I don't know, I just see that, I know I've been to a few escape rooms, and the idea of maybe augmenting an escape room or something like that, where you can layer in virtual objects with physical things, and that kind of mix I think could be really cool for VR arcades. Anyway, there's some thoughts.
I'm all for the VR arcades. I'm just really worried about hygiene. I've been to the VR conferences where they're just oh, try out our demo, and the headset's just sopping wet with sweat. And sure, there are VR covers out there and all that, but the headset after a lot of use, it does have a musty characteristics. Not to turn you off at all. But yeah, arcades, I don't know. I take that stuff pretty seriously, but I'm really hoping that VR arcades do take off and that it leads to more multiplayer content. So right now, developers are looking at the VR platform and saying, well, I'm not going to invest all this time into this multiplayer functionality since there's not many people out there playing, and how many people have friends who also have a Vive or Rift and stuff like that. But really, it's multiplayer experiences that are, to me, the magical part of VR. It's seeing your friends in there and that social experience. And there's a game called Hover Junkers where you're in this post-apocalyptic wasteland, on these hovercrafts that are conveniently the size of your room, and you're just going out salvaging scrap and shooting people, and it's just so much fun. it's no longer like Call of Duty where you're just like press control to crouch and like space to jump. It's like, oh shit, people are shooting at me. Like, I need to take cover. And you're like, bang, bang, bang. Like, it's so much fun. And hopefully, like, arcades will just lead to these like LAN-style VR parties.
I have to say my thighs have hurt so much from VR experience. I didn't realize how bad a shape I'm in after I'm crouching for like an hour and a half doing different VR experiences.
So, what kind of tools and technologies would you like to see developed to make VR development easier, make it more open, make it better for everyone that's just building it?
That's a really good question. For me, this is it sounds silly. I want a VR headset on a mannequin so that I can just take the head and then do development so I don't have to keep putting the headset on and off. But I mean, like for actual tools, like I'm at least our studio's pretty good how it is. Like Unity's made it really easy to just they have an interface where you have a set of headsets, and whichever one it finds, that's the one it uses. And it makes it makes picking up and doing development super easy, super nice. And Unreal and all the other engines are adopting that exact same kind of thing, or even developing in VR. So while you just open up your level in VR, you can actually see how big everything is, and you can play around directly in there. So that's been really helpful.
I think there's just been a tremendous amount of investment into making the tools really good. So, Unity, Unreal, they're doing a fantastic job. And just to contrast this, based on like a year ago, big difference. A year and a half ago, we started to build VR camera systems. We still are working on it now, but it's a side project at our company. And essentially what it does here, long story short, it takes 180 3D video and makes it just super simple to use. So we're using computer vision, we're using things like OpenGL, we're using an Oculus SDK in some places in there. And those components at the end there, we just eventually scrapped it because it was just like such a pain to connect all of those components together at a low level. And to say it's 100 times easier in Unity or Unreal is like an understatement. Especially when like the documentation for like the Oculus API and stuff like that, trying to figure out what the hell they're, you know what I mean? So I have to say I'm really impressed with the tool already.
I recommend checking out I think it was at Unite that Unity did a recent video showing their progress on, in VR development tools and interfaces. The idea of placing objects in a scene in VR using your VR system. Check out that video. It's neat to see. And basically, Unity's doing a great job. Anything that I could imagine that I want and that I desire, Unity's probably working on that. From what I've seen, they're doing a good job. So.
Just one quick comment. A few of us were at some of the Oculus Connect and Steam Dev Days, and Valve has Steam, which is one of the largest gaming platforms in the world, and most of their clients and developers on that platform are not in VR. Yet the conference was like overwhelmingly focused on VR. I'd be annoyed if I was there and not working in VR. So it just goes to show how much focus and development they're putting on to make these tools like that we talked about.
Unreal is also working on VR editors and stuff like that.
It's at 414.
Yeah, the VR editor was before Unity had it. So.
I actually, we just use Unity for our game. I mean, I don't want to.
Both tools are really awesome. Yeah. I'm always just looking out for stuff that can help us benchmarking for performance and stuff like that. Because with VR, especially when you're running on the Rift or you're running on the Vive, it's 90 frames per second, and you just can't drop those frames or else people are going to get sick. So just looking out for tools like that. Looking out for better tools for testing stuff too. Like it does really suck to play test in VR sometimes. Like the novelty wears off because it's like, oh shit, okay, put it on, go up, put your controllers on. Like you get so lazy that you're just kind of like at your desk, kind of just putting the headset up and like trying stuff. But,
especially if you're just tweaking things, and you're just like, it takes 5 minutes to get set up. It's like, oh, I need to change this from 2 to 2.5. Well, shit. And it just goes on from there.
And then,
sorry.
testing networking stuff is tough too. It's like Unreal, when you want to test networking, you can just kind of go like spawn 2 clients and it opens up in 2 windows, and you can just like go to one window, do some stuff, go to the other, do some other stuff. In VR though, it's like you only have one headset, so it's like both of those clients will then have the same head movement. So it just gets a bit finicky there when you're trying to debug networking stuff. Not sure what the best solution is for that, but it is definitely a bottleneck.
Here's the tool. Someone's got to invent for VR. We're getting used to VR and the magic of that to be able to teleport my headset to me. How about that one? A lot of money for that one.
All right, gentlemen, thank you. Those are all of my questions. But now we have the floor open to anybody in the audience. Get those hands up. Let's see some audience participation. You, in the back. Have your hand up. Yeah.
I was wondering, what do you guys think is the future? Walking around a room or sitting down and teleporting? Which one is going to win out? Or do you think they're both going to
Why do they have to win out? I think there's going to be both.
It's different uses, but I feel like the real answer to that is whether people will have a VR room dedicated in their house. I want every, if we can have like that dedicated, like a reading room / TV room, like we've had those in the past. When we have a VR room, our actual holodeck, I feel that the getting up and walking around within that room has the potential to totally win out, but it would need that to happen. And I don't think so.
Just get rid of the dining room. Nobody needs a dining room.
Well, listen, there was a time when it was like, you have a whole room dedicated to your TV? What? Like, the living room, right? It's just like, there will be a time where it's like, yeah, of course I have a whole room dedicated to VR. Yeah, no biggie. All I have to do is just like, show the Vive to my girlfriend, and she like puts it on, tries tilt brush, and goes like, I understand now. Yay, we can move and get a VR.
All right. Yeah.
So right now in sort of mass market gaming, a big pushing factor for what makes one game more successful than another is visual fidelity. And with that, there's a lot you can do on a television to have things that are lower resolution, lower frame rate, be able to push better effects, more things on screen exist. That might be a harder edge to get in VR with the 90 frames per second, double line rendering and all of this. Do you think that a lot of the gaming market will maybe care less about that specific aspect of gaming with what they're getting from VR? Or do you think there's other things you can do with VR in the visual fidelity area that you simply can't get on a standard 2D display?
I think that there's just other components. Like visual fidelity is always nice. One of the big complaints about VR is that resolution and quality is not going to be anywhere near you're going to get other places. But there are other new things that are really important in VR, and one of those being presence and feeling like it's real. So it's not that those things aren't important anymore or they won't ever be, it's that there's just other things as well. So even if you don't quite hit that, that amazing fidelity, you can still have a really great experience within it.
Yeah, for games that are designed for not VR, but then ported to VR and have VR functionality, I'm at the point where, personally, I've actually been working with this technology so long that the novelty has actually started to wear off for me. And because the novelty's worn off, games that are just ported to VR, I actually prefer on a TV that has higher pixel density per degree. I prefer to play Thumper, for example, on just a regular TV. It was originally designed for a regular TV, and so the VR experience doesn't really add anything other than just giving me a slightly wider field of view and stereo vision, but at the cost of resolution. It's actually a lot more crisp and clear, and I can have camera shakes in the TV version. So, if the game is not designed for VR, then it's almost unfair. But yeah, VR is definitely all about the things that aren't visual fidelity that are attracting people, and maybe that is just a short-term thing. I feel that's a time-based thing where it's like right now the novelty is so high that it just wipes that away, and I think the real question that you're asking is, once that novelty wears off, is VR still going to be? Is that kind of what you're getting at?
If you don't, let me jump back in.
Go.
So just in the mass market games right now, that's how they can sort of edge each other out, right? Are you just different ball game? And if that is the case, how do you edge each other out in VR? Is it just experience-based, or does fidelity play that same role?
I think fidelity does still play a role. Absolutely.
One of the things too about VR is we're still all trying to figure out what's the best stuff. So, if you look at it, I say at least, I haven't heard anyone else say this, but I say that it's moving 3 times quicker than Moore's Law, because every 6 months it looks like the fidelity and the quality doubles. Part of that is we're learning, and part of that is just bigger projects with bigger studios. But ultimately, there's all kinds of new applications. So I think you're going to find metrics that you can edge out, whether it's fidelity for a game, or back when it was CPUs was all about like how many the gigahertz and all that. When you have this kind of mature market, which by the way is falling apart now, but that's a side topic. But when you have it's a mature market and you have kind of metrics to compete against, then you can do those kinds of things. But in an emerging market where you're figuring out what those kind of best metrics are, it's still anybody's guess.
Yeah, like on top of that, like there's a lot, I guess in the fidelity realm, like there's a lot that you still can't necessarily do, or not that you can't do it, it's just things are expensive, like having a whole bunch of ordered particles, like transparency, and just that'll tank your frame rate. Making sure that all of the models that are really close are your basically hero models, like that can tank your frame rate. Like there are a lot of, and like even things with like try to do proper anti-aliasing that. Right now they're still working on getting a good algorithm that doesn't tank your frame rate. And I think once we get past those hurdles, maybe fidelity will become more of a prominent feature, or more of a prominent differentiator. But for this time, I think it's more experiential. So that might just be me.
There is one factor that visual fidelity can, depending on your visual fidelity, you might actually introduce fatigue and eye strain when your visual fidelity goes too low, depending on your visual style. It's nice to go for like a cartoon approach sometimes because you can make that look good. But as an example, if you go for like the stuff that Valve produces in VR versus what maybe an indie studio produces that tries to be photorealistic but doesn't quite get there, you can actually get a lot of eye strain when you have lots of aliasing going on and maybe slightly incorrect lighting. That really fatigues me when Valve stuff doesn't fatigue me as quickly. So I feel that that's one of the places where you can really separate yourself on the photorealistic side, but then there's always the cartoon side that can kind of sidestep that whole issue.
That's like, even though VR, you're kind of like trying to you can reproduce real life things, you might be inclined to be it has to be photorealistic. Go for low quality stuff. It works just as well. And it's amazing how quickly people will adapt to it. Like I played this multiplayer game where you're raccoons camping, building weird shit, and it's just these crappy little things, and you would think I would look down or just look around and be oh my god, where am I? But you're no, this is my life now. I'm just a little raccoon, and your brain just adapts to it, and it's just yep, this is reality.
Yeah, sure.
I wonder about the durability of the equipment. Has anyone had to replace anything? I'm worried about having dependency on such expensive technology.
I have to replace one so far.
What?
Painting just the White House.
Oh, was that final or did that get?
No, this was the first generation of the consumer, the CD.
I've had to replace my home 5 controllers once, and I don't game too much at home with them, so I was a bit surprised by that. And at work, it's just I think I've gone through 2 sets of controllers now, and I don't even use them that heavily. So I am a bit concerned with this HPC's machining of these things.
So if you have multiple people, you have to have them on reserve then to stay productive, right?
Yeah.
That's the only time I've ever replaced something was the CD1, I feel the headsets are robust, but sometimes it might take some.
The CD1
Oh, sorry, the Oculus consumer version one. Sorry. So the consumer version just came out earlier this year. There's actually just some deep-seated hardware problems with the headset. So outside of durability, but we've had to replace one for the actual one lens. Just one side of the screen just stopped. Just stopped. So that was fun. And but other than that, like most of them seem to be fairly, like as long as you're not like chucking it at the ground or anything like that. At least for museums, like we need to accommodate the fact that someone could take the headset and just chuck it into the wall, and then it needs to work. And then so that's kind of horrifying, especially with all these like really delicate pieces all put together. But like most of the headsets are going to get off the market are pretty fine. They'll take a few spills and keep running.
And like sometimes they don't like do it intentionally, like it's not like they just take out my headset and throwing it, but like when you're in the Vive, or now the Rift also, you have this like chaperone system where it's like this kind of like laser grid where if you get too close to the edge of your room that you can define, it kind of pops up letting you know like, don't go any further, you will hit a wall. But when you're like the heat of action and you're like sword fighting or doing something, like you're swinging your arm and you don't know the chaperone's there, and then it kind of turns on and you're like, too late. You just like smash right into your wall. So I do have some dents at home of like just like I'm just like hitting them out. That's, yeah, it's kind of inevitable.
We lost the TV,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah. That's true.
Yeah.
So, I'm curious just about your opinion. So when you're looking at on the internet about like if you're searching Google like VR will be a flop or what VR will be a success, you about have like half and half, despite of the major investment that every firm puts on it, and despite of these investments, is people are wrong. So what do you think of people saying that it's just going to be the next Wii or the next 3D television or the next Kinect, so it's going to last a while and then eventually people will move on to something else?
So step one with that, you ask them, have they tried a Vive or a Rift? And if they say no, nothing that they say after that matters. Like seriously, like their opinion on VR does
So
not
in
matter.
conference, I speak to many people that have tried those things and said just because they tried it and because they tried that, they said it won't last. They said like it's good for a 5-minute experience, then
Sure.
after.
But then you can have that discussion at that point. It's just so many people I've talked to where they're just like, oh, I tried the cardboard. And you're like, well, come on. Like, and then you show them the Vive and they're like, holy shit. So I'd say step one, at least ask them, have they tried it?
It's what, like the $1 billion question or something? I don't know. Honestly, I unfortunately have a really hard time saying anything useful.
On this topic, I remember about a year and a half ago, there was some opinions here, some opinions there. But I don't know how many articles I've read online, easily thousands of them for in VR. And everyone that I can remember that I read that they hadn't, they said this won't catch on, either later found out that they hadn't tried it, and then retracted their statements later on in later articles saying that now they love it.
That graphics will get better, VR will get better, and MMOs will get better. What's kind of your pipe dream for VR? Like, what's your dream software for VR? Like, what do you think that you feel like it's going to be accomplishable in about 5-10 years? Like what?
I was gonna say my dream is like a non-nightmare version of Ready Player One. Like has anyone read Ready Player One? Yeah. Okay, yeah. So like just being able to just throw it on, like tell them like talk to your friend out who's currently in just hanging out in South Korea teaching, or like being able to talk to your doctor at any point because there's one available who lives in London, and like I think there's a lot of potential for that. Like I love exploring. I went on a trip and just going and just trying things out, seeing the world. And for a lot of people who don't have that opportunity, like VR is a great avenue for that. And like that's kind of what I hope for. And like, but it's probably not gonna happen for like another 30 years or something like that. Because it's gonna be this giant kind of engrossing experience. But
And I think it's along those same lines as well. I envision this world where you can enter and like we talked about before, like the real world, but with magic. So you have the real world, but yet you can do all these great things. You've got advanced machine learning and all kinds of other components within it that help understand what you're trying to do and help you reach your goals. Whether that means you want to create a piece of artwork and machine learning is helping you understand how to create it, or you want to speak with your friends and then they become right here and you can have it in there and explore it together. I mean, we're still social creatures, so I think that social element is going to play a really big role in making that utopia, and hopefully it doesn't turn into dystopia. Or fructose, yes.
I would say that what I would like probably will be a video game, and fundamentally it will need to be something that I cannot currently imagine, because I like the idea of new mechanics, game mechanics that I can't imagine, and I get to experience and be surprised by fundamentally that.
Yeah, I'm same way. Like, it kind of doesn't matter like what it's gonna be. I just hope it's gonna be really awesome, and I hope that I'll get in early. That I'll like be able to be like an early content creator. So like you read certain things about like metaverses and like Oasis and stuff like that, whereas like the first players in that were the ones who could put the Easter eggs in, the ones who could like build these like really cool things that like in 10 years from now, all of you come inside VR and I know all of you and you're like, oh, if you go in that alleyway and pull on this brick, like you get into this really cool bar that like Daniel runs. And like, that would just be so awesome. And like all these other civilians are out there running their boring lives, and I have this like cool underground part of it. I don't know, that sounds awesome.
So you just want video games to just overlap with life.
I know you wanted to hear their answers, but I'm going to pop in here because I'm the moderator. Steel Battalion, but only if I could buy another 40 button. All right, and yeah, more questions. Yeah.
Me? Oh, good. You guys have the chance to try the boy?
No, not yet. I want to.
Where you like walk around. So it's like this thing.
One of the backpack ones.
Yeah, you're like wearing like a headset and you're like walking around like a real physical location, but like what you can like touch the walls and stuff, but what you're seeing in VR is actually like they're like putting like cool textures on the walls and like it feels like you're in like a different.
And you have like so that one like you have every gun you're navigating around this like corridors and things like that. It's really cool, and there's another one opening up in Montreal or something like that, I think. Something similar to that. I can't remember off the top of my head, but like those are really cool. I've yet to try one too because it's just getting out to find one.
The coolest thing I heard about the Void though is like so you can play multiplayer with like your friends, and there's like one section. Hopefully this isn't spoilers. One section where you're kind of just like walking and you look back and like you see your friend back there, but it's on VR and you're walking and the person's actually really in back of you. But then they kind of do this thing where like they make it seem like you're going straight, but then you're actually turning somewhere. So they kind of like intentionally in the real world split you up. But in VR, it looks like you're still next to each other. And then like this kind of monster comes out and just like grabs your friend and just like rips them away. And you're like, holy shit, like this person's actually really in real life next to me, but really they're in a different room, safe. And like, it's like cool mind games. It's like,
I'm excited to try it.
Yeah, Justin?
You guys were talking about the inner ear problem, and I was wondering if you guys know if anybody's working on technology to like fudge that, if there's anything you can do. Like, I remember a lot of us probably been to amusement parks where you've got like the big screen and like the tilty chair. Like, how much movement do you need to trick your eyes and stuff like that, if any?
The coolest trick that I've seen to mitigate that problem, not solve it entirely, but for most people, maybe make it okay, is reduction of field of view. Your perception system perceives a lot of changes in momentum through your peripheral vision, and so by reducing your field of view and blacking out your peripheral vision, you can actually black out a lot of what your mind is perceiving as changes in momentum. So your inner ear doesn't get all scared that your eyes are seeing something different. So Eagle Flight will, which is a Ubisoft game, PS4, no, it's also Oculus actually, I believe, will literally black that out anytime your momentum changes. It blacks out your side view. Google Earth will reduce your view of the moving part to like a small circle in front of you, and the outer peripheral area will transition to like a nice stable grid that matches the real world, and that allows you to do like a motion and then back into you can move around and everything's stable, and then motion and then back into that's a really clever trick. So the most interesting and effective ways that I think I've seen are usually about reducing how much of your peripherals see that change in motion, which tricks your brain into not being as upset about the change.
A coworker of mine who's in the audience right now actually used to work at a lab where they did some like real sadistic stuff of like, oh, okay, I'll let you guys be the judge. You could like shoot water or something into their ears to make them think they're spinning in one way, but then like with VR goggles, they make it look like you're spinning the other way. Like that just sounds like torture for science, right?
There's one thing that they're working on is actually stimulating the nerves around related to your inner ear, and it's supposed to reduce motion sickness relating to that. Now, I just don't like the idea of that at all. I know, like, it's great to simulate. We're simulating vision, we're simulating sound and like movement and all kinds of things, but like now messing with your like electrical nervous system. I know there's already questions about like if the alignment of the virtual world is off from what the real world is, how could that affect you in the long run? You know, there's questions relating to that. I mean, it's starting to mess with your nervous system. You guys can try it, I'm not sure. That's a line.
Yeah.
So, what do you guys think about Magic Leap, if you guys heard about it? And how do you think it's
I've
gonna...
never heard of it. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
How do you think it's going to impact virtual reality? And after people, assuming it goes through and, you know, it's as cool as it sounds like, if people see this augmented reality world existing in the real world, would they, you know, not want the VR stuff? Because why have just the VR world if you can have the VR world in the real world? If that makes any sense.
Before you answer that, can one of you explain what Magic Leap is, just in case anybody doesn't know?
Okay, so basically it's a pair of glasses, kind of like AR glasses, you hook up to a tiny computer in your pocket, and then you can interact with well, you basically have like fully 3D things going on. Like in their trailer, they show like a whale leaping out of like a gymnasium ground, and then just like splashing, and everything's supposed to be at accurate scale, and you're supposed to be able to interact with everything. But the thing is, like, there's going to be an avenue for both, because like sometimes you're going to want to be able to just fly through space one time, or go to another planet, or be inside of a volcano. And like I think there's realms available for both of them. But at least with the massive appeal that something as portable as Magic Leap over like NetAR or the HoloLens, I think there's a lot of potential for that. There's a lot of problems with it, just following like all the stuff that's going on with NetAR, but that's an entirely separate topic. Is anyone else wants to speak to that?
Yeah, I think it's a really interesting technology you haven't seen. I'm always skeptical before the technology actually comes out, but they have raised something like in the ballpark of like 1.7 billion, something around that, which is insane. I mean, people like Google are not going to lead around of $500 million or Alibaba $1 billion if they're not seeing something legitimate. And what they're doing with that is creating a whole kind of new manufacturing for mixed reality. And to talk about how that differs from VR, we have augmented reality, which is the simplest version. You have your Pokemon Go, which is the very simplest, and one that projects into the world. And you have an elevated version, mixed reality, which is like the headsets, the HoloLens, Meta, things like that. And then, so the contrast between that and virtual reality is better at being immersive, and mixed reality is better at putting those virtual components into the real world. So now relating back to Magic Leap, they're doing some really cool stuff. I think the thing that excites me the most about that project is not just about all their little fancy micro mirrors or any of those things on it, but it's about they have, supposedly anyways, they have a way to mimic actually how the light enters the eye that's similar to how the human sees it. And why that's important is because it addresses some of the things that Alan mentions here with eye strain relating to the eye accommodations. So you actually can focus then on things in the real world. So they're supposedly have their prototype. We'll see. I mean, some really cool things to look forward to checking out.
I do want to talk actually just a little bit about technologies like that. are usually focused around inside-out tracking. So that's the idea of your headset is now kind of tracking the real world and understanding its motion through the real world by watching the real world, which means that you need to have a good understanding of the real world's geometry. That technology allows for a lot of cool new things to happen. It means that you don't need to move your dining room table or your coffee table or something out of the way when you go into virtual reality, because this headset can now understand the geometry around you. It allows for things like the augmented reality. It also allows for wireless, all-in-one virtual reality experiences where you can have your computer built into like an all-in-one device. Like, this is literally something you just put on. You don't need any external stuff. It just understands the environment around you, and you can now walk around in a virtual world. That's some of the magic of inside-out tracking. And this is in contrast to some of the current technology where you have outside-in tracking, where you have like camera position in the real world, and it watches you. And if you go outside of its frustum, then suddenly you don't have tracking anymore. And that's something that inside-out tracking kind of solves. And Steam VR with the HTC Vive is actually a form of inside-out tracking, where there are sensors on the headset watching for the Lighthouse base stations. So these base stations are projecting lasers, and then the headset's actually watching for these lasers and then understanding its position in the world based on the lasers that are coming in. But that does require the setup of, oh, here's your lighthouses, and they need to be set up and the system calibrated based on those positions. And that means that you can't go outside that room. But with inside-out tracking, you have the potential, when it understands any arbitrary geometry of the real world, you can go anywhere with it, you can use it anywhere. And so lots of excitement around that. Microsoft actually had announced that they have an inside-out tracking system, and I don't know enough about it to talk on it, but they're going to have third-party developers, hardware developers, working on VR headsets for Windows 10. And they will be using an inside-out tracking. Now, the challenge with these, the kind of like downside about this compared to something like Lighthouse base stations, is that now you can't have tracked. Your tracked objects are now a bigger challenge. Their tracked objects are kind of easy in Steam VR because you just put these sensors on an object, and it's pretty cheap to make that. But your inside-out tracking needs to be really good at understanding your hands. But let's say your inside-out tracking can't see your hands because they're down there and they're being occluded by your shoulder. Now, that means that you can't, in a game design scenario, you can't, let's say, look in one direction and have fine control with your hand that might be occluded from it. And that maybe there's scenarios in games where you might want to be like shooting something kind of behind you, or pointing, or like I don't know, manipulating some object kind of behind you and your shoulder's blocking, that you're looking in that direction. You can't do that with inside-out tracking if it's on the headset. And that's something that Steam VR is really good with, because the base stations are kind of out and shining inward. So there's some thoughts on inside-out tracking and the power of technologies like Magic Leap.
We got about 10 minutes for like 2 more questions. Mess in the back.
Yeah, my question is a little bit more about the industry. I'm completely ignorant about the development. It's not my zone. But I can see an application in the treatment and recovery community in the medical industry. Do you guys have any understanding of the blending of the cultures between the VR development community and like traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and all of that great work that's being done, combining those cultures? Do you have any knowledge locally about people working in that industry? No.
I was going to say there's research being done over at, I'm gonna butcher the pronunciation of this. The university, it's over in Ottawa, or how do you pronounce that? Ottawa? Ottawa? Yeah, no, so I apologize to any French speakers because I'm terrible. But Professor Bouchard is doing some work on with PTSD and helping people with to begin with, like a cave system to help people with who have PTSD from going over during the war, sit down, recreate the scenario, and then be able to go back through that. And they're working.
Right, that's immersion therapy, yeah.
Yeah, and on top of that, he's, as far as I know, he's working with some other groups to do virtual reality interpretations of the same kind of therapy. But outside of that, like we're my company's trying to get into that kind of space because there's a lot of value in being able to not only I can't talk too much to any projects, but there's a lot of value in that because like virtual reality can help a lot of people because it can create scenarios that you wouldn't necessarily, like controlled scenarios you wouldn't be able to get anywhere else. People who have been attacked, people who've gone through traumatic scenarios, you can recreate that, walk them through it, and then be able to prepare them for the real world, or even helping people understand other people who have gone through these scenarios and show them what that's like to give them insight into that entirely separate world.
There's lots of initiatives in that space. I mean, it's opening up a new world of possibilities. And, just to name kind of 3 quick areas that relate to, helping people with research in virtual reality. One is for people in a hospital, gets their mind off, whatever they're dealing with right there. Other ones, just watched a video yesterday of this older woman. She had dementia. She was very stuck in where she couldn't go out and experience the world. But then she got to see her homeland, Scotland, right? And to her, that was just incredible and really fulfilling to her. Tons of other cases like that. Here's another really good one. I think has a lot of potential. Is in habituating people against their irrational fears. So specifically for if you have phobias. Perfect example is arachnophobia. Okay, so one of the ways that psychiatrists and psychologists help people with their phobia when it's irrational is slowly condition them to be able to deal with that. So maybe you have something that looks like a fake spider and it's over there, and then you increase the fidelity over time as they get comfortable with it, and their mind gets habituated to that fear, and their brain realizes eventually as it gets closer and closer that they don't have to be afraid of that spider, or they don't have to have that irrational fear of that ledge. So those are just to kind of name a few, but there are a lot of initiatives in that area.
I was going to say in VR though you can also play with scale, so there's no reason why that spider has to be this big.
Right. And we have 5 minutes left, so last question. Yeah.
Hey guys, great talk so far, I like it. I just wanted to touch on like the developer culture and how have your thoughts on how things are going to, because I can definitely see VR just showing up in the studios and you sit down at your desk and you put your headset on, you start either coding or just interacting with something, making something Tony Stark style, right? So definitely see that coming, and I just curious what your thoughts are and how that's going to like reach out to different types of people who want to make games, but like they don't see themselves sitting at a computer making them, and it just reaches out and makes them all come together, and that sort of thought process. What are your thoughts on that? The culture for that.
Well, I mean, there's getting more and more tools that are more towards real life. Like I think Alan here mentioned the one with Unity and Unreal, where you can start to develop environments that you can just pick and place. I know one of the apps we're building in my company is the ability to model, which will be with your hands, which you can use later on for things like games. So, I see it progressing in the future more and more like reality. But I think ultimately there's just this huge power in being able to code. So I just really don't see, even though I think that'll get simpler, I don't see that kind of disappearing. I'm not sure if that answered your question.
Oh yeah, no, it's not going to disappear, for sure. But just making things in virtual reality in general, I guess, is what I'm, at the core of what I'm getting at, right? You make a game in virtual reality, you make like a house in virtual, like you design plans for a house in virtual reality, that kind of thing, right? And then the culture involved in the studio specifically too, because that seems like where that aspect would be going, right?
Right, so it's interesting because VR has created a need for VR in its development. And this is something that we experienced very early on with Keep Talking, Nobody Explodes, where we have this idea of traditional 3D art development, but traditional 3D art development, you can fudge everything in terms of scale, specifically, and in terms of proportions. You can make things larger than life, and it just looks right in a traditional TV video game or something. So VR broke all of that. Now scale matters 100%. Everything needs to be the scale that you expect it to be, or the environment actually feels unbelievable in that way. If you're wanting somebody to feel like they're sitting at a desk, it needs to be the right size. If there's a door over there, it needs to be the right size. Otherwise, they're just going to look at it and be like, oh, where am I? Like, what is this wacky thing that I am? And so VR has now kind of required us to be, so, I mean, with our development process, we actually just physically measured things in the real world and said, okay, it needs to be this size, and then that's how we did that. But when you have really good VR development tools, now you can make the right choices for VR because you're experiencing in VR. So I see that like culture for VR development studios changing and adapting to use VR in their process. For traditional development, I think that it's going to need to mature a lot before your culture is going to start adapting that as their typical workflow. Like a lot of maturity there. So VR.
Is there a market for that? Like for development tools for developers? Is that kind of stuff?
Yeah, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, that's what Unity's business is, and there's lots of, they have an asset store where people are making extensions for VR-specific tools. So.
Exciting.
Well, it's 8:30, an hour and a half has gone by way faster than I wanted it to. But that's our panel for tonight. Everybody give a big... So these fine gentlemen will be blowing our minds for years to come. All right.
Thank you again to our panel, and thank you for moderating the panel. Another round of applause for also for our moderator. Our three last announcements. Once the heads that is providing the spaces have been organizing charity funds, so there is like a small pot for money. We just encourage people, if you want to kind of be part of the community, and they're basically leasing us our space, they encourage us just to spare some change in their bucks. So if you can, please do it. We also have a social just after, and I'm hoping that some of the people from the panel will be able to join us at Monkey Joe's downstairs. So if you continue, just grab a beer with them, have this a great discussion about your vision of VR and this personal. Lastly, do we have an announcement from the December?
Yes, December 28th, where we have a social, where the whole event is just a get-together, and we're working that out with Level 1, just downstairs from the loft in the near the Rideau Center. So they, we're working things out with them. That's where it's going to take place.
So book the date if you're around town on December 28th, and be in between your family's parties. We're going to have a great gathering. So we would like to see and as many of you as we can. So thank you very much, and we'll see you very soon.
Right.
Thank you.